Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Chats in the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I virtually invite people into the blog cabin to talk about life. And today we're talking about finance. I mean, that's a huge topic as it is right around the holidays, and people try to overspend or not try to overspend, but they still end up getting in debt. So, Dana, thank you so much for coming. Before we get into talking about this, introduce yourself a little bit.
All right, thanks so much for having me, Melissa. I'm Dana Miranda. I'm the founder of Healthy Rich. We are a platform for budget-free, inclusive financial education. And I have a background in personal finance media. So I've been a personal finance journalist going on 7 years. And I came into it just as a writer and a blogger, just interested in figuring out kind of how to make a career writing. And I really enjoyed writing for digital media on a blog specifically. And a job with a personal finance media startup came available. And I thought personal finance sounds pretty boring, but the team seems interesting and I get to write for a blog full time. So why don't I give it a shot? And I really fell in love with writing about money and helping people demystify things like you mentioned, debt, credit scores, and talking about kind of our relationship with money. So over the years, my interest has evolved quite a bit into thinking more along the lines of that relationship with money and how not just our own behavior with money, but also sort of our cultural beliefs around money and the way that we teach personal finance are affecting the way that we approach money in our individual lives. So I've started looking into that a lot more, and Healthy Rich exists now to hopefully share some new perspectives that we don't see a lot in personal finance and to kind of respond to those ways that I think that we are the things that we're missing in the way that we currently teach personal finance.
Wow, there's like several like loaded topics right there that, I mean, I took notes as you were talking. As you can see, I was writing and sitting down so I can remember. But let's talk about budget free, because a lot of people think, oh, I have to stick to a budget. I have to stick to a budget. So what exactly is the concept of budget free?
Yeah, so my approach to teaching personal finance and talking about money is an antidote to what I call budget culture, which is the general way that we approach money in our culture and the way that we teach personal finance, which is really focused on budgeting specifically, but more generally, the ideas that are wrapped around budgeting, which are really focused on restriction, deprivation, rely on discipline. And they don't take into account a lot of the realities in our lives, a lot of the diversity and nuances of people's relationships with money and just experiences in life that influence how we make and use money in our lives. So a budget-free approach is taking out this reliance on discipline and embracing the nuances of money in our lives and the nuances of our lives in general, and letting money just be one piece of that, and approaching it more intuitively from our individual needs, and incorporating the realities of our individual lives into financial advice and just individual approaches to money.
I love how you said like the budget. Can you look at it like a punishment? Like if you make the budget, then you have some left over, and then you're like feel like, okay, where did the money go?
Yes, yeah, it is really sort of presented often as a punishment in response to something that you've done wrong, which is spending on something that you wanted to buy. A lot of people start budgeting in response to having some amount of debt. And just treat that automatically as a failing, and treating, we sort of treat budgeting as this universal solution, when in a lot of cases it doesn't work for people. And across the board, even if it were a realistic solution, people just aren't doing it. People don't stick to budgets. A very small percentage of households actually keep a household budget, which I think, it really surprises me that that continues to be kind of the baseline piece of advice when it's just not working for anybody. I think we need a different solution.
I love how you said like the budget, because if you're married, especially if you're married, you can have two different people think about money two different ways. So some people think of budget as a mindset, like, oh, like you said, a punishment. But then you have to think about, you have to have a new relationship with money as well. How do we go about thinking about money is not the end all be all? Of course, you need it to pay your bills, but that's not what your life needs to be wrapped around.
Absolutely. I think it starts with that a really big reframing of our approach to money. When we think about, a lot of people see money management as this siloed task in our lives. And I think that's why we get advice that's really focused. It's almost like scientific, like it's really focused on like spreadsheet budgeting, that kind of thing, or an app that's just basically another version of a spreadsheet, and numbers and sort of practical decision making, kind of weighing pros and cons kinds of things, and sets of rules. But in reality, money is this messy, complicated, like, again, nuanced thing in our lives. Like you mentioned, just two people coming together in a relationship, they bring completely different backgrounds and experiences with money into that relationship. And that's something you have to navigate. You can't just sit down and grab some budget spreadsheet and just like fit your lives into that all of a sudden. There's a lot of conversation you need to have around that, just like you do with any other part of your relationship, navigating any other part of your life when you're bringing two lives together. Money is just another piece of that. It's not some different sort of siloed thing that you can just pull a set of rules and just figure out how to make it work. And I think that's why we see so many people struggling with things like debt and budgeting, because they're just seeing this set of rules that makes it seem as if money is just a formula that you just need to figure out in your life, when actually it's much more like the relationship you have with anyone else in your life, the relationship that you have with yourself, and all of the complications and histories that you bring to that. So it's, I think it starts with understanding that the approach needs to change to more of one of a relationship, of thinking through sort of a personal development kind of lens, looking at the psychology of money and things like that, rather than just a clear kind of line that needs to be crossed, an end goal that we need to get to that is right for everybody, because that doesn't really exist.
I love how you were talking about budgets and spreadsheets and things like that. It's almost like they're taking on another job, and that's where I think a lot of times you hear where people are not excited about doing their taxes, not excited about the end of the month paying their bills. It's because they feel like it's another chore, another burden that they have to carry. How do we get out of that mindset?
So I take what I call an easy approach to money, and for in my personal experience, and so this is the way that I'm approaching teaching personal finance, having a greater understanding of how, I'll say, our financial systems, which sounds like kind of a big thing, but just sort of like how finance works. So you mentioned taxes. That's something that feels like a huge chore because there's so much weight put on it, and the system is so intentionally complex. The same thing goes for any debt we take out, especially mortgages, which are a huge debt that people feel like we're sort of required to take, and that it's just kind of the norm. Credit card debt, student loans, credit scores, like any of these financial systems that we interact with every day, even banking, how your bank works and how they assess fees and things. These are all like intentionally complex systems. And then we are put in where we have to interact with them, and then we're given a set of like expectations for how things are supposed to go. And so we feel like going into our taxes, we're like, if you don't pay the right amount, you're going to go to jail. If you pay too much, then you're being taken advantage of. If you don't get your full refund, like, then you're an idiot. Like, there's just all these like expectations put on us. And so that there's so much weight going into it. So I think that ease starts with having some understanding of those financial systems. And very simply first, like understanding that they're intentionally complex. I think that a lot of people don't come with that understanding of seeing like it's made to be complex. This isn't because I'm stupid. It's not a me problem. This is a problem with the system. And if you can kind of release that shame that comes with trying to interact with these systems, I think that's a really good first step. But then, my approach is to just break down the complexities as much as I can, and in particular, sort of set aside the complexities that most people don't need to understand, and just say, like, here's what sort of matters most in your life, and here's how to navigate systems in the ways that work best for you. That understanding for me, like, was a huge weight off my shoulders and makes it a lot easier then to make the decisions in my life that make sense. Because when you don't understand how the system works, you're just looking for what's the right answer, what's my next step, and that's, I think, where you get caught up in following sort of this budget culture advice, which is like, someone just told me here's the right thing to do, and I'm going to follow that because I don't understand any of it. So if you can gain that understanding, then you can start to look inside and make the decisions that make the most sense for you.
Wow. I mean, you unpacked a lot there too. I do want to talk about your aha moment, because you said you had a weight off your shoulder, but we need to take a brief commercial break and then we'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Joanna, and I would like to share with you a little bit about Shores of Grace, Shores Philly. It's a ministry located in Philadelphia. The portion of Shores that I volunteer for goes into Kensington, an area greatly impacted by homelessness and addiction. And we go and we take love, food, clothing, snacks, conversation. We believe that it is a way that we can meet people right where they are and show them the love of Jesus. We have seen lives changed in big ways and in small ways, and we have built wonderful relationships with the people in the community. We have big plans, more we'd like to do, and we would appreciate any support, either through prayer or through donation. If you would like to donate, you can go to shoresofgrace.com, and in the menu, click on Donate. And we just ask that you put Philly in your donation comments. Thank you.
And we are back talking with Dana about personal finance. And you said before the break that you had a big, like, a weight lifted off your shoulder, your aha moment with money. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I had a great privilege in being a personal finance journalist. So like I said, when I started in 2015 with a personal finance media startup, I knew nothing about money. I was kind of a typical millennial with a ton of student loan debt. I had some old credit card debt that I was just kind of burying my head in the sand. I couldn't figure out how to make money. I was working as a freelance writer and was just like really low income for several years. And then I got this job, and my job every day was to research and write about personal finance topics. And so I was learning all of this stuff, spending 40 hours a week just getting a masterclass in personal finance. So I learned how to understand my own credit score, how to see what was on my credit report, and how to tackle those things, how to deal with debt collectors, that kind of thing. So that was sort of my, I guess, aha moment. It took, it was like unfolding over several years of like understanding the impact that knowledge was having for me. I really appreciated it. And simultaneously, I had my first full-time job, like my first kind of career full-time job ever in my life. And so I was making a decent salary for the first time in my whole life. I had a steady paycheck. And so I was able to put that knowledge to use. So it's kind of a double aha moment of like understanding that knowing what was going on with the systems allowed me to make the choices that were right for me, and also making more than even a living wage, but like a comfortable wage allowed me the cushion and the comfort that I needed to address some of those issues. So I didn't aggressively pay down debt or anything, but I got like my student loans out of default and got them on a payment plan that made sense. I tackled that credit card debt, got that on a payment plan. And I improved my credit score. I was able to open like an secured credit card because I had a couple $100s that I could put down for a security deposit, which I would have not been able to do previously. But I also previously didn't know that such a thing as a secured credit card existed. And so putting those two things together, like having a comfortable wage and having the knowledge, really changed my financial circumstances.
Wow. Do you think a lot of the times the television and movies play up with the people's perception of what money's supposed to be, or how you're supposed to, like, the struggle with money as well? Like, especially when we were talking about doing taxes earlier, and how they're like, oh my gosh, last minute, and you see people like flying to the mailbox to file, or they can't find the form or something like that. Do you think mainstream media has a lot to do with our relationship with money?
I think so. I think it really creeps in, like budget culture, I think really creeps in to every facet of life. The conversations that we have with people, how our parents teach us about money because it's what they learned and what they saw in the media. Absolutely conversations in the media, again, with taxes, like this idea that if you don't file your taxes, you go to jail. There's like so much fear around it that puts a ton of pressure. But you can file an extension if you're not going to be able to file your taxes on time. You can do revisions. I forget what correction forms or whatever, like up to 3 years back. Like you can go back and correct things. Not everybody gets audited. I actually don't know what the percentage is, but it's not common. Like most people don't get audited. And the deductions that exist like are not actually that complex for most people. It's getting that's all getting kind of simplified. So there's a lot of things that are just like all this weight is put on it that make it really scary. But you're right. I think it is like the way that it's talked about in mainstream, like news media, in popular media, in education, and just in kind of the conversations that we're having every day really reinforce all of that. And I think a lot of it is because we just kind of take at face value that the point of money is to spend as little as possible and to have as much as possible. And that we're just kind of aiming for wealth, and that is unquestioned. And I think you had to start there to understand, like, do any of these steps that I'm taking make sense? Like, is my goal to hoard the most wealth I can possibly get? Like, some people's goal might be that, but most people I know, that's not actually what you're aiming for. It's kind of just what you're pushed into because you're told that that's the right way to do money. And there's so much fear around doing money wrong. So much fear. And then it gets passed on because there's fear about not setting your kids up well to do money right. So all of that sort of gets reinforced. So yeah, we need to take a step back, just like with any other relationship that we're examining, any other kind of thing that we're trying to learn about ourselves, any kind of moment of self-improvement or anything. You have to start with that, like, what is the end goal and what is the real kind of meaning of this and purpose of this in my life in order to decide what the next step is that you want to take with it.
Now, you mentioned something earlier about cultural beliefs around money, especially if you're in a mixed marriage, like my husband's a native of Mexico and I'm from the United States. And our thing about money is so different. He came from a thing of not having a lot. I mean, very rural background. We're talking no running water or anything when he was growing up. To now he's like wanting to hold all the money tight. And here I am. I came from a background here in the United States, was just compared to his growing up. I had more. Even though I was middle class. I was lower middle class, but still, I would still want the luxuries. So let's talk about how we can get in cultural wise, especially if you're in that mixed relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, again, it's bringing it back and figuring out for yourself what your goals are, what experience you want to create in your life or your relationship or whatever it is, what experience you want to create for your children. I had a conversation. I was at a financial education conference last week and had a great conversation with someone who studied immigrant families from Mexico and was particularly interested in lending circles. Have you heard of the practice of lending circles?
Mm-hmm.
I forget what they're called in Spanish. He said the name and I can't remember it now. But the concept is, instead of taking out a loan from a bank, you gather a group of people that put in a certain amount of money, and then all of the people participating, they get the pot once a month. And so it's a way for the community to support each other, and it's basically a loan within the community. So a lot of immigrant, in particular, he was looking at Mexican families, but I think it's common with immigrant families from a lot of backgrounds, are doing that instead of participating in lending like within the system and building credit scores and things and working with banks and having a bank account. But it's like it sounds like a terrible financial practice, because you're not building that credit score. You're not, you're unbanked. And so you're just like not kind of on the grid, but it's actually this really wonderful way to participate in a community or a family, and a really safe way to participate with your finances, in a way that lending from a bank isn't necessarily, because they don't care about you. They're charging you interest. This isn't happening in lending circles. And you're just kind of a number or a line in their ledger. But this is, a lending circle is this wonderful way to participate in community. And so I think, to have kind of culturally relevant conversations about money and personal finance and education and the ways that we teach or talk about money in general, that we need to constantly question the assumptions that are being made. So, if someone says like you're borrowing money from friends and family, you should be borrowing that amount from the bank so you can build a credit score. Step back and ask, like, why is that the way that we do it? What would that mean in my life? Do I actually need that? Or is this just kind of the set of rules and assumptions that we're working from? And I think in a lot of cases, if you're kind of mixing cultures, or you're speaking to someone from a cultural background that's different from yours, that you need to strip away all of the assumptions and probably rewrite the assumptions that you're working with. And that's something that I don't see happening in personal finance media very well at all. A lot of the content and kind of programs that are being created come from mostly middle-class white men who are not exploring those nuances in our cultural backgrounds or our experiences. And so that's why at Healthy Rich, like, a lot of my purpose is to bring in those other voices and hear people's stories and start to understand all of the things that we've been missing.
Now, how did you get interested in personal finance? You talked about how you were writing and then you finally got a job and you were able to integrate both of them. But how did you get involved? Not a lot of people really want to take up personal finance, and not a lot of people want to talk about the no budget at all.
Yeah, I absolutely didn't. I wouldn't have sought it out. But I was interested in freelancing and entrepreneurship because I was trying to build a freelance writing career myself. And so there was a lot of crossover with people who were talking about like making money from a blog or making money as a freelancer, making money online. This was starting in like 2011. And so I was a little bit privy to those conversations. And so but I didn't cross over into like talking about debt and credit scores and picking the right credit card and opening a bank account and all that stuff. I wouldn't have been attracted to it. But this job opening came up, and the person who was going to be the editor on the staff was someone that I had been working with and just someone that I was interested in working with more. So I applied for the job, and because of my background in digital media, I was a fit, and then was able to learn the personal finance stuff along the way. And I kind of resisted it for a long time. I thought of myself more still as a writer, and that's just happened to be the thing I was writing about. I wasn't like branding myself as a personal finance writer. but I just really enjoyed breaking down those complex topics. And I enjoy that on any kind of topic. I've written about blogging, and I've written about grammar and things that people kind of don't like to approach. I like to break those down and hopefully make them fun, but at least make them accessible. And so there's just like so much to tackle in personal finance with that kind of thing. So I came to really enjoy being an educator, even though I approached it with the job as a journalist. I started to feel much more like an educator because I was breaking down and explaining and teaching concepts to people. And then when I became a freelancer after I left that job and was a freelancer full time as a personal finance writer, I was writing for a lot of different sites and saw this, what I mentioned, which is just kind of this really homogenous field of people writing about the subject and realizing all of the nuances and diversity that we were leaving out. And so I wanted to explore that with Healthy Rich. So it gives me an opportunity to continue with education from a perspective that I feel like is more inclusive and makes more sense to me. And also we share stories. I share essays from people about their relationships with money. So it gives me an opportunity to do some storytelling, to be an editor, to kind of bring in that journalist side as well. And so I really got interested in money more as a creative pursuit. Like I'm still not interested in again, aggressive debt payoff, credit card hacking, or a lot of things that people write about, early retirement or increasing my salary, making as much money as possible. I don't really tell those stories. That's not really what I'm after. It's really just about engaging with this subject and finding creative ways to do that.
I love how you said when you were talking about when you were writing and grammar and stuff like that, you were trying to make ways to make it fun. How do you make personal finance fun?
Making it personal. It's a little bit cheesy putting the personal in personal finance. A lot of people say that, but I focus on storytelling first. So if you read the Healthy Rich blog, we share essays from contributors just talking about their relationship with money, coming from tons of different angles, whether they're focusing on their identity. We've had essays from women and LGBT people and people with disabilities, and a lot of Black women telling stories about how that identity has affected their relationship with work and money. And also just sharing kind of tips about how their family approaches money or how they approach money, not in a way of here's how to optimize the way that we did, but more of here's how money fits into our life and what we've learned. And telling those personal stories, I think, makes it a lot more interesting to read. It's a lot more interesting for me to publish that kind of content. And so it makes my job fun. And also, it's really the way that we all learn about money in everyday life. Most people are actually not working with a financial planner or even reading financial content on the internet. Most people are getting personal finance advice from family and friends. When they have a big decision to make, they're asking family and friends. And so you might think those people are not the experts. They don't have all the answers, but that's how we're learning about money, in the same ways that's who we turn to when we have questions about romantic relationships with friends, something that we have going on at work. That's who we turn to because we're looking for something familiar. We're looking for someone who understands us. And so I think starting with those personal stories and storytelling and conversation is really kind of an inroad to talking about personal finance and how money fits into your life. And it also can take away some of the shame that we have talking about money. I'm really comfortable talking about my finances and sharing the numbers and my experiences, but I've been doing this for 7 years, so I've gotten really comfortable with it. A lot of people are still really concerned about sharing their stories or sharing the specifics of their finances because there's so much shame around it. So the more that we can hear those stories from other people and start to get that feeling, see yourself in those stories and start to understand that you're not alone, you're not the only one that these things are happening to, the more that we can talk about it more and more and start to work together to find those answers that make sense for us.
I hear a lot about gamifying your experience, gamifying your money with your money. What's your opinion on that?
I've been seeing that a lot because I've always been interested in financial technology, a lot of apps, money management apps. And so that started coming out quite a bit in the last like 10 years or in the time that I've been working in this space. Personally, I've always found it kind of annoying because I'm just like not a gaming person. It's not something that makes me more likely to interact with something. The idea of like leaderboards and whatever kind of goes with that. I always find it kind of distracting when that gets added in. So I certainly have a personal aversion to it, but I have also read recently some really great, I wish I could remember the name of a book because someone just came out with a book about just the gamification of our lives in general. So if I can think of that, I'll let you know afterwards, and maybe you can share it with people or put it in show notes or something. But I've seen some great discussions around that, about the fact that everything is kind of gamified, and that really the purpose of it seems to be just to sort of keep engagement, which can kind of translate into addiction of just kind of keeping, maybe not like clinical addiction, but the fact of like a habit, building the habit of doing something. And so I can see where with financial technology, the idea is helping people with habit building, and a lot of people are interested in building better financial habits. So you can kind of connect the dots, and it seems like it makes sense, like a practical step with money. But I think it comes back to, again, that gamification is usually towards one end. And in a very cynical way, I would say that it's just to get you to engage with the app, because that's how the apps keep making money, is having you engage with it. But even just on like on a less cynical reading of it, that the goal just assumes, the product assumes that your goal is to make the most money and spend the least amount of money and pay off your debt as fast as possible. And those goals might not align with the experience that you want to create in your life. And so if you just kind of follow along because you're getting sucked into that gamification, you're suddenly getting sucked into going down a path towards a goal that doesn't make any sense for your life. And so if it stays contained within the app, at the least, that becomes just kind of a money management method or app that does nothing for you. But if it starts to affect your habits in life and the decisions that you're making in your life every day, that starts to take your life in a direction that isn't right for you.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about freelancing and self-employment, because obviously that's a whole nother issue. With a lot of people do freelance and a lot of people work for themselves, and that's a whole other issue with money, because you're not getting that steady paycheck. How do you wrap your mindset around, okay, I'm going to take the leap and go out on my own and do this?
So when I talk to people who are preparing to do that, the biggest piece of advice that I give is to do the thing that I did sort of the second time that I went freelance compared to what I didn't do the first time, which is to make a financial plan for yourself. That doesn't have to mean, I know a lot of people talk about like saving up an emergency fund that's a certain number of months of expenses or income or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be that. You could make a financial plan that includes, significantly downsizing your home so that your living expenses are a lot less. You could make a financial plan that means that your partner is going to be the breadwinner for your family, and so you don't have to contribute. So it doesn't have to mean necessarily just like saving up a pile of money. But that can be part of it. So save up what I call a comfort fund, which is the thing that a lot of people call like an FU fund or an emergency fund. But it kind of encompasses all of those things. So it allows you to comfortably make life decisions without money weighing in. So you can make that decision to take the leap if you are working full time, to take the leap into freelance. So start with that kind of exit plan and make the timeline and the items on the list and the amount of money you want to save, the financial details, whatever makes sense for you. Just take the time to consider it, so you're not just kind of blindly taking a leap. Or if a blind leap makes sense for you, also do that, but just kind of do it intentionally and understand that that makes sense. The first time that I started freelancing, I wasn't working a full-time job. I was working in food service jobs, and And so I wasn't making like a great living, but I was steadily working and making money. And I left that to be a freelance writer without really knowing how to make money as a freelance writer. And those years that I spent doing that and making very little money served me in a lot of other ways. So I wouldn't go back and change that. But financially, they don't look good. I was making very little money. So if that is something that's a priority for you because you have a home that you want to continue to pay for, you have people who depend on you for your income, or you just like the life that you have, like I, after leaving my full-time job, I had gotten comfortable with the lifestyle I was living, and I liked having the choices that the money that I had gave me. And so I wanted to maintain that when I went into freelancing. So I saved some money to be more comfortable and made a plan with my partner for how we would pay for our housing and kind of keep our lifestyle the way that we wanted it. So if that's a priority for you, make that plan going in. But don't be afraid of that move. That's probably the bigger conversation that's harder to have, is this fear of the instability of freelancing. I have found in my life, and I have heard from a lot of freelancers, that there's actually a lot more kind of assurance for your income when you're self-employed or as a freelancer because of the diversification of your income. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are talking right now about like going into a potential recession and what does that look like as a freelancer. So if I were working a full-time job, I might be really afraid that my company would decide to downsize and that I would get laid off, and then my entire income and all of my benefits, anything that I had with that, would get cut off in one fell swoop. And no client as a freelancer can do that to me. So I'm in charge of my health insurance, and I'm in charge of my retirement savings, and I'm very much in charge of my income because I can choose the clients that I have. I can set the rates. And so for me, I feel a lot more stability in that position. So there are a lot of other things that come with that, because you also have a lot more responsibility, that you don't just show up and you're sort of told what to do in the day, and you're told how much money you're going to make, and someone takes care of all of the details of the business. Like when you're freelancing or self-employed, you have to do all of those things. So or hire someone to do them. So you do have to take those things into consideration. But as far as just sort of the stability aspect, I would challenge people to kind of let go. I think that's become a myth. Employment used to have a lot more stability, but we have seen in recent years that layoffs are becoming a lot more common. We see it happen really frequently. And even if the company doesn't pull the rug from under you, people are staying in jobs for a lot less time too. So there's just more kind of flexibility and movement in the workforce in general. So freelancing isn't as much of a significant change from that as some people think.
I love how you just put out a lot of things that a lot of people are scared when they go freelance or self-employed. The insurance, the other costs for going freelance, and you don't have that stability that you would have in a regular job. How do we go about making sure that we have enough to cover all those expenses when you go freelance?
That there's a little bit of nuance to that, I think, because I think probably the most straightforward way would be to say, like, how much money have you spent over the last 6 months? Save up that much, and then you'll feel like you're pretty much set to go for the next 6 months. That's a really easy way to do it, but there's a lot of room in there to make other changes. So if you land on that number and you feel like there's no way that I'm going to be able to bring this in through client work over the next 6 months, or there's no way that I'm going to be able to set this aside with the salary that I have and save that up in the amount of time like before I want to leave my job, then you can make, other changes. I think you can sort of pull the different levers in your life of like, what are you contributing to housing and kind of bills and other expenses, and where are there changes that are accessible to you? What are you contributing right now to debt? Again, if you're like really focusing aggressively on debt payoff, is there a change there that you can make without putting yourself in a position that makes you uncomfortable, like default or something, if you want to avoid that? Can you pull some levers there and reprioritize the ways that you're using your money so that the burden of planning for this transition isn't quite so much? And then and you can do that, I guess, as you're saving, if that's what you want to do, if you want to save up money. And you can also do that as part of the transition so that you don't need to make as much money as a freelancer as you do currently if you're working a full-time job. You could, but I don't think that has to require, again, sort of the restriction and deprivation that we look at through budgeting. I think that's what a lot of people turn to. I think it's more about just changing kind of your experience, making maybe lifestyle changes. But I think that even has kind of a budget culture connotation to it of like, you're too extravagant, so spend less money. It's not really about that. It's just about picking your priorities to create the experience you want. And if the experience that you want is to work for yourself, and that's a priority, what else needs to be adjusted to make that happen on the timeline that you want it to happen? Maybe one adjustment that you could make is, instead of going freelance this year, that you want to do it in 3 years. And then that makes it a lot easier for you, those sorts of things. So think about the timeline and the effects on your life and the resources that are available to you, and the lifestyle that you want to create around that as a whole, instead of just kind of picking it, just thinking about like, what's the income and what are my expenses, and kind of this like balance sheet sort of way. Again, bring in the nuances of your life and see how you can make that fit in.
Okay, so if you take the leap and you say, okay, I'm going to go freelance, how do you find the freelance jobs?
That kind of depends on the sort of work that you want to do. There are tons of sources for freelance work, and freelance clients and gigs. And I would recommend exploring them all if you're brand new. So your network is a really important place to start, especially if you're coming from a full-time career doing something. That's another huge difference for me from the first time that I was a freelancer to the second time that I went back to it. I was going from a full-time job with a network in the personal finance niche. So I had this focus and this big network of people that I could tap into, who knew my work, who would reach out to me and refer work. So that's the place to start. And just let people know that you're looking for work, because they might not know. Let them know directly. Send a text to somebody that says, I know you talk to a lot of people in this space. I'm trying to get some work in this space. I'm available, so please just keep me in mind. And don't feel like that makes you a burden. People love to recommend work to people, especially kind of have that pool of referrals that they can tap into. I know when someone asks me, they're looking for writers for something, it's great when I know that there are people looking for work, because then I can provide a service to someone, like I can help somebody out. So you are helping somebody to help someone. If you ask them for referrals, you're not a burden on them. And I think I constantly have to battle that feeling, and say, give myself that message as well. But I really like to drive it home for other people too, is like, ask for work. That is, you have to let people know that you're looking. Otherwise they might think you're too busy. They might not even know you're available. They might not know that you're freelancing now. They might not know the topics that you cover, or the kind of work that you're looking for. So be really clear about that and do it regularly. Follow up, remind them. And then you can also just like look at job boards. Places like LinkedIn has freelance jobs in addition to full-time jobs. Freelancer networks like I'm suddenly blanking. Upwork is a really popular one. So looking for the job postings there, getting yourself listed there can be a good way to get started. A lot of times those job boards are like looking for the lowest. They're trying to get just kind of the lowest rate possible. And so it's not always a great place to build your career long term, but it can be a great place to get started and understand what clients are looking for and what it's like to work with them, and then get some work out there, get some referrals, and kind of move on. And then just kind of pitching. So if you're a writer in particular, just pitching articles to publications that are looking for it. It helps to have some clips to show the work that you've done, but it's not always required. So don't be afraid to pitch if you haven't. If your idea is good, then you can demonstrate that you can create the piece that you're pitching, there's a chance that it could get picked up. So that's a good way to go. Blogs are a great place to start there too. You might get a couple of unpaid pieces that you can use as writing samples then to get paid. And they will probably be lower paid if you pitch, especially to like individual blogs that are working with lower resources. But they can be a really great place to start because you can learn what it's like to work with an editor, learn what it's like to kind of like work on a deadline, have your piece published somewhere that's not your own blog. So those are really good, like pitching, looking at job boards, and then reaching into your network.
I love this. You have left us with so much information, and I do want to extend an invitation for you to come back because you talked about credit score, credit report, and debt, how to deal with debt collectors. I would love for you to come back and talk about that because I think that's a whole episode in itself.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'd love to. I love talking about that. I can talk about my experience with debt as well. And again, break through that kind of veil of shame a little bit, hopefully, and break down all of those parts that are really complex and hopefully make people feel a little bit better about the debt that they are dealing with.
Yeah. So our time, like I said, our time is almost up. Is there one little last nugget before we talk about where people can find you at that you'd like to leave people with?
So I would say to bring it back to the budget-free approach, just kind of question everything that you're learning about money, because budget culture really permeates every conversation about money and every piece of advice that you're probably hearing and every piece of education that you might come across. There's a lot of really good nuggets that you can take away, but make sure you question it to find out if it's feels relevant for your life, if it feels relevant for your identity and your experience and your cultural background. Question it to see if it feels like the goal that they're trying to help you achieve is the experience that you want in your life. Start there before assuming that that's the right answer for you, because there really is no single right answer for everyone. So when you are hearing something presented that way, question it and think about how you can break that down and take your own budget-free approach to your personal finances.
I love that. So where can people find you at?
So our hub is at www.healthyrich.co. That'll take you to our Substack, where we share the stories and essays from contributors that I mentioned. I also share some budget-free approaches to things like credit card debt, student loan debt, the recession, inflation, things like that. So you can get kind of a different take on financial education. And you can read the blog there, you can subscribe, and paid subscribers also get access to some personal finance classes. I have some new ones coming in the new year, and right now we have a few classes on how to get started freelancing and find your first freelance gig. So anyone who's interested in that part of the conversation, those are available there.
I absolutely love that. I love the fact that you offer some free resources, but you obviously have to offer some paid resources because you got to get paid.
Yes. Yeah. So, we pay our contributors, so any paid subscriptions are appreciated so that we can continue to do that and pay fair wages to the writers that contribute to this conversation.
Now, how many people do you employ as far as your website? Is it just you, and then are there other people?
As an employee of the company, it's just me as an employee owner. And then I work with a team of contractors. So I have 3 regular contractors who help with blog writing and editing. And I have a designer and video editor. So those are regularly on my team. And then we have contributors who will contribute usually one piece. I've had a couple of people who come back and have contributed a couple of pieces to the blog. So that's a vast number, but it's usually kind of one-off contributors whenever we need pitches. But I'm working with a team of 3 very part-time people, and then me full-time.
Yeah, but still, you're working with a team. I love the fact that you're working with a team, and you want to make sure you're paying them fair wages, which is so important in this day and age.
Absolutely, yeah, it's a core value.
So, Dana, I want to thank you so much for coming on. And like I said, I'm going to actually send you a link to read book because I really want to talk about the credit score, the credit reports, and debt collecting because I think a lot of shame around people have a lot of shame around that.
Absolutely.
Guys, I will put in the show notes everywhere you can find Dana. As far as maybe if we find that book as well, I'll put that in the show notes as well.
Okay.
So, guys, thank you so much, Dana, for coming on. It has been a total blast talking to you.
Thanks so much for having me, Melissa. I really appreciated being here.
All right, guys, we will see you on the next chat from the Blog Cabin. Be blessed, and most importantly, remember, keep chatting. Bye.